Hey guys, we are back with another video, and in the previous one I briefly walked you through how we created kind of like a budget hotel commercial and shot it all on our own. I briefly walked through the color grade and asked you guys if you wanted an elaboration, and a few of you said yes. So in this video we're gonna walk through how I graded the project. I briefly showed you how I grouped things and made it kind of like more of a professional workflow, or at least that's what I attempted. So I'm gonna walk you through exactly what I did and why I did what I did. What I mostly grade is short form content, a lot from my Instagram and also for TikTok or sometimes YouTube here. And the reason why I changed things up this time from what you've seen in all my other videos is that when we're grading a larger project, it's way easier to put in the look at the entire timeline or the entire group of clips instead of having to individually grade and adjust everything. So what we do is we have a group before the clip. We have some adjustments that we do to the individual clips, and then we have something that we do after the clip adjustments. So with that said, just a brief explanation of what we're doing. Let's jump into Davinci and let me show you exactly what it looks like. We're inside Davinci Resolve, and just to show you really quickly, you can see we have a lot of clips, and this is why it makes sense to make a different kind of workflow instead of grading each clip completely individual. So let's jump into the color page here, and I'm just show you how I did it, and then I'll just walk you through it quickly in a separate timeline. But this is the actual edit. So you'll see that first, if we go to Lightbox, this is where I grouped everything. You can just click and select a couple of shots or all the shots that you need. Go to groups or add into new group and then name it, or go to groups if you already have one. I have my Canon assigned to group or drone assigned to group, and then they will be in that group. And you can find the groups down here in the group section, and you can see what clips are in what group. These are the drone clips and these are all the Canon clips. So this is essentially how it works. Now, when you're up here, and you can do that if you highlight the clips like this, and then you can select what group you want to see, if it's the drone clips or if it is the Canon clips. Let's just focus on the Canon clips for now. Let's head over to one of our clips. This one is an example with me. So I'm gonna hide the clips again, just to make it a little bit easier. You can either use this arrow to go to group pre-clip, clip, and group post-clip, or you can just use these small dots. This is the same thing. So the first dot is our pre-clip. The first thing you need to do is go from log, because this was shot in log. If you don't have log, of course, this doesn't make any difference. You don't have to use the pre one, but I had my log, Cinema Gamut, Canon log 3, into Davinci Wide Gamut and into Davinci Intermediate. This is a larger color space. I said earlier, I have a video on that, but this is essentially just to convert it into that color space, and I do that before I do anything else. Now, my camera and the ND filter that we used has a little bit of offset in the white balance, so what I did was just to reduce the tint slightly and increase the temperature a little bit. You can see just makes the footage or the image a little bit warmer. Then if we go into our post clip, this is where you will make your Davinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709 conversion. So essentially taking it again from that color space, Davinci Wide Gamut, Intermediate, and then to Rec 709 and Gamut 2.4. Now, if you don't want to convert it into Davinci Wide Gamut first, you can just put in this one and then go directly from Canon or whatever other log that you're using into Rec 709. Now, the reason why I'm doing this as well and why it makes sense in this kind of workflow is because we have drone clips as well. So by converting everything into Davinci Wide Gamut first, and then into the proper Rec 709, then we get the same kind of workflow with all of it. And I did the same thing for the drone clips, so you can just quickly see that. If we go into the drone groups, you can see it's the exact same, but the difference is here, I went from DJI, log, and gamut into Davinci Wide Gamut, and then into Rec 709. So this is the exact same as for the Canon clips. So back to the Canon, and just to show you the exact workflow, I'll run you through it in a second as well. But first, this conversion to Davinci Wide Gamut. The white balance is up to you. You don't have to do it. This is just my preference. Then from Davinci Wide Gamut and into Rec 709. These will come later. So what I did as the second thing is just turn these off for a second, so it makes more sense. Okay, so now we can see that everything will be converted. So this applies to the entire group, and this applies to the entire group. But these on the clip level is only for this particular clip. So what I did is my usual went in and did an S-curve for the contrast, then adjusted the exposure to make sure it's a little bit nicer. And then if I needed some more white balance adjustments, I'm doing that. I don't think we used an ND filter for this one, so I actually pulled back some of the magenta, made it a little bit warmer again, just because this clip needed it a little bit. Then after I've done my color correction, I actually went back into our post group, and this is where I put in my look. So this will apply to all the clips, and this is where we then get our colors. So the first thing is our primaries, just getting that teal and orange kind of look. You can see how that changes. It's more orange here now and more teal in shadows. Then adjusting the curves to make sure that we get the skin tones and everything looking as we want to. Then I went into adding some contrast. To do that usually with the sat versus loom, pulling down some of the shadows, pulling up the luminance a little bit, and then kind of making a midpoint where I don't want things to change. You can see how that changes up things. This is very much a preference thing. And then some shadow balance, because you can see the shadows is all over the place. So just going into my shadows in the log wheel and adjusting that so that our shadows is actually black and not teal. This is again a look that you can style in, but I'm just going to make sure that my different scopes here for the red, green, and blue are kind of level so that it is black. Now, this is something that might need a little bit of adjustment on the different clips, but in this case, I think it worked out pretty well. All the clips were shot in sort of the same location as well. And then for the last thing, I just went in and did my masking as I always do. So I made a mask on me as a subject. Then I made a highlight mask just to show a little bit of the highlights. I made sure that I didn't take all the shadows, so I actually made a luminance qualifier here. And then for the shadows, I did sort of the same, coming in from the left in this case, because the sun was coming from up here, and just darkening the side a little bit. Again, these are just masks to make sure that everything looks a little bit nicer. Now it looks a little bit blurry. That's because I was walking in front of a leaf. So this is how it came out to look. So this was a quick walkthrough here. I would just want to show you how it works exactly. So I'm going into another timeline. This is a timeline that I just have a few clips. I just have a drone clip here, another drone clip here, then walking shot, Joya again, then me, and then the cocktails. I'm not going to grade it fully. I'm just going to show you the workflow. So let's head into the color tab again, head into Lightbox, and just select all clips here. Now, these first two are drone clips, so I'm going to select those. I'm going to put them into the groups because this is the same project. They still have the groups, so I'm just going to assign them to this group. Now those are assigned to the drone group. I'm going to click on all these ones because they are the Canon ones and assign those to the Canon group. So now if I go into my groups, drone clips, Canon clips, it's that easy. Let's focus on the Canon clips for now. So now in my timeline here, I only see the Canon clips. So to make the workflow, let's first head into our pre-group, and it's actually made the pre-group again because it's the same as before. So the pre and the post will actually continue. So let's just walk you through that and pretend that we're doing everything for the first time, but instead of making the notes, I'm just going to show you. This is our log to Davinci Wide Gamut, and this, it's actually really nice that it continues to the next timeline as well, because then you don't have to do it again. So just putting in the settings, Canon Cinema Gamut, Canon Log 3, Davinci Wide Gamut, and Davinci Intermediate. So you can see that converts it from this log to an even more flat profile, if you will, because this is Davinci Wide Gamut and it's a larger color space. So it actually looks a little bit more flat and desaturated. Now the white balance doesn't make sense right now. So let's head into our post group. Normally there would be only one node. This is the one. And this I just used to make, again, the conversion from Davinci Wide Gamut, Intermediate, into Rec 709, and Gamut 2.4. And now it looks like this. Now the footage is converted properly into Rec 709. You can actually see it works on all the clips. So we didn't have to do that for every single clip or copy it between them. Now it just worked for all the clips at once, which is really nice. Now I could go in and do my slight white balance adjustment here, just to get a little bit more warmth, but I'm gonna wait with that because that's usually something that I do later on. So the thing that we're gonna do now, we get into what's individually for the clip. So I'm gonna do my usual color correction. Gonna label this contrast, gonna label this one exposure, and this one could be our white balance, or we could do the white balance across all the clips. So for the contrast, heading into the curve, making a slight S-curve here. As you can see, that only affects this clip. So it's not something that affects all the other clips, and that's because the contrast might be slightly different from all of them. We could also have the contrast on the entire level. That could make sense, but I decided to do it on the individual level for this because I know some of the clips, particularly this one, requires a little bit more work with the contrast, and it's just easier to dial those in like this. Then for the exposure, I'm looking at my waveform. I like to look at it like this. I think the gain is a little bit too high, so I'm going to drag that down a little bit to maybe 95. And then the lift could use a little bit of work as well. Maybe actually drag that down and then just pull the gamma up to around 3. And now I think it looks a little bit softer and a little bit nicer. It was shot with proper exposure, so don't need to do that much. For the white balance, this is where I would just make my change in here, make it a little bit warmer. Now we know from our other clip that it could use a little bit more magenta. Now it may be a little bit too green, but I actually like how it looks now. So I'm just going to leave the white balance alone for this example. Now, this is my usual workflow so far. So if you've seen any of my other videos, it's not different. It's just split up. So the Rec 709 conversion first, that would normally sit here before the white balance. And then here from Davinci White Gamut to Rec 709, that would normally sit here. So I've just split it up in different groups. I hope that makes sense. And then it just goes across all of them. Now, here is when the cool thing comes with the groups. So we want to dial in a look that is similar for all the clips. And to make sure that we get the same look, the same colors, the same everything across all the clips, this is why I split it up in the groups like this. So if we go into our post group, this you will see is our primaries, our curves, contrast, and shadow balance, as I just showed you, is what I do normally as well. So that would be the next step. I would normally make 3 or 4 nodes here, and that would be it. And then I would make my masking underneath. Let's just delete these for now because we're actually going to do it in here. So again, I have done it already, so I'm just going to show you, but the primaries, negative 0.01, 0.02 and 0.03 in the blues, and then the opposite in the gamma, just creates this teal and orange look where we get a little bit more warmth in highlights and more teal in shadows. Then for the curves, we go in, usually I lock in the skin tones as the first thing. Those lie around this area from the reds to the oranges. I do that for all of the hue versus hue, hue versus sat, and hue versus lume. And if you look at this, you can see I actually desaturated the skin tones quite a lot because they were very orange and magenta right now. I usually check out my skin tones in the vector scope and make sure that they lie on this line, and they do. So that's pretty nice. I can also use my qualifier tool and see that they lie exactly. You can see a circle appear here. They lie exactly where they're supposed to. You do that by selecting the qualifier here and then making sure that display qualifier focus is set here. That's how you get that. So now I've dialed in my look with the curves. Again, we can see that applies to all of them, but because we haven't done our adjustments on the other clips, we can actually just, for the sake of making sure everything looks nice, take the settings from this one and just copy them to the other ones. It won't be perfect, but now we should get a little bit closer to something that we like. Again, you can see this clip needs some more work. Actually, all of them does. This looks a little bit okay, but just to show you how it works. Okay, so far, log to Davinci White Gamut, Davinci White Gamut to Rec 709, our color correction, and then we are doing our color grading now. Then I'll add some contrast, again, doing this in here. Usually I lock in the colors as well by clicking on the shirt. That would be this point. And then I'm just going to drag up or down the luminance here to figure out what works. And then I'm dragging down the shadows. I'm not going to correct these because I actually set in the look for the full video. And then if we go back to our parade, you can see everything is skewed a little bit. The reds are further down in the shadows and the greens and the blues are lifted, which makes sense because that's essentially what we did in the primaries. But just to dial in that look a little bit more, I'm just going to take our shadow balance, which is not in our primaries, but actually going to our log wheels and then taking our shadows here, putting them back, and then we get back to our shadows because these are level now in the shadows or in the blacks, which is just getting us rid of some of that teal, but it's still there. You can see if we turn off the primaries, it kind of balances out. So you can see it is still a little bit teal. It's just not as obvious, and we don't want it to look unnatural. So that's why I did it like this. Now, the cool thing is that this just applies to all of them. So we can see how that just kind of changes the aspect of all of them. And now if we had our exposure settings correct on the other clips here, just try and see if we can quickly correct this one. Not gonna do it perfectly, but just slightly. This is a little bit better. Then we can go into our post group here again and see how that affects everything. Looks pretty nice. The skin tones are getting a little bit better. The water is not as teal bright and everything just looks a little bit better. So this is essentially just our look, and this just goes across everything. As said, that's just very nice. I like to work like this because it saves a lot of time instead of having to copy paste and adjust this. Now, one thing you will have to do to log it in, and what I already did, is if you go into the curves on this clip and set in the skin tones and everything, you might need to widen or adjust some of the things and go back and forth between the clips to make sure that it works for all the clips, because sometimes the skin tones will be different in one clip from another. So you need to make sure that you style these walking through the different shots. You can't just always log it in one shot and then everything works. So that is how you dial in your look across the shots. You don't just grade one clip and then go ahead, just to let you know that. Exactly how we would do it if we copied them across, but then we have to do it for every single clip, whereas now we get a cohesive look that will work across everything. Then the last thing we would do, instead of having our color grade here, we will just do our parallel node. So adding a parallel node here, or clicking option A in my case to make another parallel node. I'm gonna make an outside node here, as I always do. And then I'm gonna make another serial node and just connect it here. Why? Because this is gonna be my focus node. This is gonna be my highlight node. And this is gonna be my shadow node. I know this tutorial is a little bit long, but we have to go through everything. And as you can hear with my rambling, I'm trying to get through it as quickly as possible, but hang on here, okay? Let's just hide the clips for a second and just make sure that we get our focus. So our focus here, let's just get through a little bit, will be a circular mask. And we're just gonna lock that in here, feather it out, Shift H to see what we're doing, like so. And then we're gonna add a little bit more contrast. So I'm just gonna drag my shadows down a little bit, highlights up a little bit, just to create a bit more contrast and focus on the element. I look really heavy in this shot, so that's nice. See, this is a little bit better, so I don't look as sad. And then for the outside node, which essentially just selects everything that we didn't select in the first one, as you can see here, we are just gonna decrease the gamma a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit to draw in everything and make things look nice. So this mask in itself just did this, which makes a huge difference already. Now I want to emphasize some of the highlights. So I'm just going to zoom out quite a bit and make a highlight mask. And if we look at me, you can see that there are some shadows here. So we can see the sun is coming from the right side. We're going to make a mask that is here. I always like to make the softness 100. Then I can work a little bit nicer with it, like so. And now I want to make sure that I don't affect any of the shadows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to only touch the luminance here in the qualifier, just going to drag up the shadows until I see the shadows start disappearing. And then I like to give it a low softness of 15. So just so it softens and blends a little bit more, like so. And I'm just going to put up the blur just to make sure everything is looking nice. And then I'm going to go into my curves and just pull up the highlights a little bit, maybe pull down the white point a little bit as well. Just kind of play around with this, and you can see how that affects all the brighter points, but not the shadows in this case. If we didn't have this one, you can see it affects everything, apart from now that we're doing this. It just sells the effect a little bit more, so that it's only the highlights that we are affecting. Now, we could put in a dehaze, as I usually do here. Dehaze 0.1. just to haze it out a little bit more. And we could also add a bit of warmth, so maybe 0.2 and 0.1 to add a little bit of yellow. And now we have a little bit of a warmer tone here. It might be a little bit too much, but I'm trying to get through the tutorial as quickly as possible to show you. And then I'm going to do a rectangular mask for the shadows, pull that down to the side, pull it out quite a bit, like so. Shift H to see what we're doing. And I'm going to do the opposite here. I'm going to head into the qualifier, pull down the highlights to make sure we don't get too much of that. And then the high softness, 15 again. See where the sweet spot is for this. I think it's around here. Pull out the blur a little bit as well. And then we are going to do the opposite. We're going to drag down the shadows a little bit, like so. Drag up the black point a little bit as well. Something like this. And then we have added our masking, which just makes the entire image. But the cool thing is that all of our primaries here have been set in. We could, in theory, put in our mask as well in this place. But the problem is that if we go between our clips, we will see that in this case, the sun is actually coming from the left, or it's actually coming from behind, but that'll make the masks look a little bit different. In this case, the sun is coming directly from above. And in this case, it is coming from, well, behind as well, but you can't really see it, but you can see it a little bit here. It's coming more from the left and there's more shadows on the right. So if I were to put all of the masks in the post group, we couldn't change it up individually for the clips, and that is why I do this. Now, one thing that I found super essential and useful in this process is now if I want to copy my masks to the next clip, I can actually make another node here in between. I'm just going to call this compound because that is exactly what I'm going to use it for. And I'm just going to connect all of the clips here. So now all the masks are inheriting everything from this node instead of this node. And because this node is not doing anything, it doesn't really make any difference in terms of nodes, in terms of the grade, in terms of anything. But what it does do is that if I now take all these clips and I right click and I say create compound node here in the bottom, now I have a node that is essentially just all the nodes but combined in one. What makes this super cool is that now I can just select all the other clips here. I think I can actually just select all the clips and then I can go to my color. You can see the color, but I'm clicking on the color tab in the menu. Then I can see append node to selected clips. If I do this, you'll see that if I go in here, I now have my compound node in this one. I have it in all my clips actually because I selected all of them. And if I right click and say decompose compound node, now I have my clips. Now you could do it without this one as well, but then you'd have to go into this one and connect the two others, the highlights and the shadows, because it doesn't connect automatically. This is where I found that this node is super nice to have because then it just connects everything for yourself. Now, the reason to do that is that now I can just go in and adjust my masks as I need, making the highlight come from the other side and turn around the shadows like this. And now I have my fully functioning masks on this one. I don't have to do a lot of work. I just have to put them around and maybe I have to do a few more adjustments, but this essentially works quite well on this. So just to recap super fast again, the first thing we did, log to Davinci Wide Gamut. This is optional. You don't have to do it, but I think it makes sense in this kind of workflow to get a larger color space, to get more out of your colors, and also just to get everything into the same color space, essentially, as that's what we did with the drone clips as well. Then for the second step in the post group, we did the same conversion, but from Davinci Wide Gamut into Rec. 09, Gamma 2.4. You can just do this one as set if you just want to convert from your Canon, Sony, DJI, whatever log format you have directly. That also works as long as you're grading everything before that conversion node. Then we go into our clip node, and that's where we do our color correction, and that we can copy between them and adjust our exposure and contrast accordingly to every clip. Then I went back into our post group to log in our look. And of course you want to do the color correction on all the clips first so that you can actually dial in your look. So that is the process. It is a bit tedious, but that is usually how it works best. And if you have clips that are shot in the same location, a lot of the color correction can just be copied. Then we dialed in our look. That is completely up to your preference. And then as the last thing, again, up to preference, you can use the masks. This is my go-to mask. I have some videos on that as well. I use them in almost all my videos. So if you want to see more in depth on how I use them, rather than this quick tutorial, I have a lot on that as well. So that's essentially the workflow that I use to grade that entire video. Let me just show you how many clips we have again in here. So that's it for this video. I really hope it gave you something now. As I've said in the beginning, I mostly graded short form content in the past, so I've been really good at dialing in exactly how to color grade in short form video, but grading larger projects is still a little bit new. So dialing in this more professional workflow is something that I'm really going to do in the future, also as I start doing a lot more freelance work. But this is essentially just to show you where I started. And then in a couple of months when I've really dialed in the setup, if it's changed, I'm gonna make a full tutorial on how to set up the professional workflow that I use. But at least I hope it gave you some inspiration. The grouping is something that I stumbled upon myself recently in another YouTube video where I saw how they made a short film. So this is essentially just putting everything together and then showing you guys exactly how I did. So I hope you learned something. I hope you at least liked the video. If you did, hit the like button below. It actually helps a lot. If you're not already subscribed, consider doing that as well. And with all that said, until the next time, take care.